Join us on the program, Ken Klukowski from Breitbart News, here to talk about Mayor Bloomberg. How you doing, Ken?
Well, Cam, I was doing great until that intro. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. I always do what I can for you. We shan't talk about that story, but we shall talk about Mayor Bloomberg, who says that in the wake of the Boston bombings, this shows that the Constitution, our interpretation of the Constitution, must change in order to basically give up some of our rights and some of our liberties and to allow a more overpowering and overarching government with a surveillance society baked into the cake, so to speak.
Well, what's most frustrating about that is that Mayor Mike is ignoring the whole purpose that we have a written Constitution. When he says change our interpretation, he means no longer assign to the words the definitions that the dictionary would indicate belong with those words. Remember, this is the guy who said, I know what the Second Amendment says, but I interpret those words as meaning that no private citizens have a right to own a gun, any gun whatsoever. You'll recall back in the Heller days, of course, now it's in vogue. Chuck Schumer and a number of the smart anti-gun politicians in the country are always careful to start their gun control moves by saying, I have great respect for the Second Amendment, and the following does not violate the Second Amendment. And then they lay out some massive gun control move. With Mayor Bloomberg, we need to remember that in 2008, he told the Supreme Court that when they were interpreting the text of the Constitution, they should not interpret the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. They should not interpret that to mean that the people have any right whatsoever to keep and bear arms. So I think we know where he's coming from, and this is just the latest reiteration of that.
Talking with Ken Klukowski from Breitbart News. And Ken, is he going to get, look, here's the thing. It's not just Mayor Bloomberg saying this, though. This is really this is a mindset that, in the wake of terrorist acts like this, what we have to do is we have to clamp down on people. This is, I guess, what is the opposite mindset? I don't know anybody out there who's saying, well, the answer to this is anarchy. Cam, what we need to do is have no laws whatsoever. But what is that thoughtful pushback against the mindset that whenever we have one of these incidents in Boston, the first thing we have to do is give up our liberty and our freedom?
Well, 3 points to that. First of all, it's to understand that the whole purpose, not only do we have a written Constitution for a reason, and we should interpret the words of the supreme law of the land according to their ordinary meaning, which is the only way that rational people could do it, and the Supreme Court held repeatedly. I can think of a 1932 case right now where they said that the whole reason it was put in ordinary language is so the voters would know what they were voting to make the supreme law of the land. It was designed to be understood by your listeners, by all of us. But what those words say is they lay out a government of limited powers that enumerates certain rights for the people and says that the people have other rights and spell out the powers of government and say that they're limited. And third, the reason for that is that the Founding Fathers understood that there is a legitimate role for government. Madison famously said in the Federalist Papers, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. But then goes on to say that because government is comprised of men who are not angels, that is why we need to, even though there is a legitimate role for government, we must carefully limit its powers according to the written terms of the Constitution. I think it just proceeds from an utterly unrealistic premise that communists try and do when it comes to economics, and that's the idea that if you just give the government enough power, in the case of communism, it's power over property and over contracts and over the economy, that if you just give, here it's public safety, that if you just give the government all the power it can possibly ask for, they'll be able to fix everything in your life, and that's just absurd.
Absolutely. It is. And, it's when you talk about, I'm so glad you brought up the Madison quotes, because it seems like the paternalists out there, they always forget that second part, that governments are derived of men who are not angels and who are just as imperfect as the men and women that they are seeking to rule over. And in the case of the paternalists, they really are seeking to rule over us. I guess, Ken, they would say, well, look, we've gone to the right schools. We have our PhDs. We're smarter. We're specialized. We've spent our entire careers studying these things. Of course we're going to know more than you. We're supposed to know more than you about these things.
Well, and as you said, that's a paternalistic attitude, and the reality is it fails to. I deal with this all the time. I'm in D.C. I deal with all of these PhDs, all of these JDs. Of course, I have a JD myself, so I'm surrounded by lawyers. And they have the attitude that they fail to understand the difference between intelligence and wisdom. You know, intelligence is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, not a vegetable. But wisdom is knowing that you don't put a tomato in a fruit salad. And I'll tell you, D.C. is full of people who don't grasp that simple concept. And the reality is some of the best presidents this country has had, from George Washington to Ronald Reagan, they surround themselves with all sorts of PhDs and JDs and whatnot, but they were by no means uneducated men, but they were typically, in the case of Ronald Reagan, a 4-year bachelor's degree. And the reality is he proved to be a fantastic president. It's being a chief executive is about principle, it's about character, it's about philosophy, and it's about values. And we see, again, from the best presidents we've ever had, that you don't need an Ivy League education for that. And we see with some of the Ivy League educated leaders that we've had that some of them make some of the worst leaders you could ever want.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Or not want, as the case may be.
So, I mean, Ken, is this going to be a continuing debate, you think, right alongside the gun control debate, right alongside the debate over, how much responsibility it is to for us to manage our own diets and things of that nature?
Oh, Cam, I think it is part of just the timeless struggle between government power and individual liberty, and something that the framers understood would always be in tension. You know, Jefferson wrote about how it is the nature of government to grow and expand and consume. So there always has to be that pushback from the voters to say, okay, we understand that there are certain functions like national security that only government can do, or printing money, or establishing interstate channels of commerce, be they interstate roads or waterways or whatever, that they understand that there is a legitimate role in the Constitution for government, but it's a constant struggle. We have to correct every single moment, every election day, checking to see where is government pushing past the constraints of the Constitution and then voting them back inside the constraints. So I think this will go for as long as the Republic endures. This is just the latest chapter of it, and one of the most egregious and brazen examples in Mike Bloomberg.
All right. Listen, Ken, really appreciate your time, sir. Thank you so much, and look forward to talking again very soon.
Thank you, Cam.